After suspending funding to the UN agency that helps Palestinians, Canada is instead sending $40 million in aid to other organizations that support civilians in Gaza. The money is being diverted to the World Food Program, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Canada and several other countries suspended funding to UNWRA after Israel claimed several members of its staff were involved in Hamas's terrorist attack on October 7th. Joining us now to discuss the link between Hamas and UNWRA is Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ms. Heinrich, thank you very much for being back with us on Forum Daily.
Of course, my pleasure, David.
So the Israeli government has released intelligence showing the overlap between Hamas and UNWRA. What can you tell us about how intertwined these two entities are?
Well, very much. You see, UNRWA is a Palestinian-run agency under the auspices of the United Nations. That's how I call it. And it is flawed on various levels, from its mere existence as an unprecedented refugee agency dedicated to the Palestinians, and we can discuss what it means a bit later, but also with the most outrageous development as of recently, what you stated, that we are certain, we know, and we informed the agency of some of its members' direct involvement in the atrocities of October 7th. We told the agency, and I know that some media outlets also received this dossier, that 12 members, 12 UN employees participated in one way or another in the Hamas massacre. Some of them crossed the border into Israel. Some of them, at least one of them, participated in the kidnapping of a hostage, an Israeli hostage. One of them participated in the kidnapping of a body of a soldier. Another coordinated logistics for Hamas before the massacre, and also secured ammunition for this terrorist group.
Mm-hmm.
And these are UN employees that are receiving taxpayer money from various countries around the world. You know that UNRWA's overall annual budget is over $1 billion. And you know how many countries are involved in raising the funds and funneling it into Gaza. They think they're doing it for good purposes, right? Humanitarian aid to help the Palestinian people. But eventually, this is where the money is going to terrorists. Some of them, by the way, these UNRWA members were teachers. A social worker was there. And we know what they did on October 7th because we tracked their cell phone data and movements, and we have intelligence reports and some intelligence that was found on bodies of terrorists, and even information that were received during interrogation of other terrorists that were brought into questioning in Israel. So we are certain of this involvement. It's not just 12 bad apples, because UNRWA is fully embedded with this Hamas ideology. This is how they educate Palestinian children to hate Jews, to glorify martyrs, to dream of obliterating the Jewish state. UNRWA teachers celebrated the massacre, and we have many more examples.
And for people who've maybe been critical of UNRWA in the past, this isn't necessarily new. In fact, we've had previous directors of UNRWA state that there was overlap between UNRWA and Hamas. Why do you think this was overlooked by the international community for so long?
Well, for a few reasons. And a previous head of UNRWA, of this agency, as you said, he said that he is aware that UNRWA is intertwined with Hamas, but he says, I think there's a quote of him saying, but I don't see it as a crime. How outrageous is that? A few reasons here. This is a Palestinian-run agency, and in its very essence, it is dedicated not to the resettling of refugees after a war, and in this case, the War of 48, the War of Israel's independence, the war that they themselves started, like other UN agency, refugees agency. This agency is dedicated to perpetuating the Palestinian problem, to maintain the status of refugee and make sure that they, like unlike other refugee group around the world, will be able to inherit this status of refugees for 5 generations now. And why? Because they wish to remain so-called refugees, perpetuated victimhood here, until when? Until Israel will cease to exist. When you boil it
Yeah,
down, this is the essence of UNRWA. Now, countries around the
stay
world
stay with us.
might,
We'll be
yes,
right back. I apologize to interrupt, but we'll be right back after this
of
break.
course.
We're back with Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for Israel's Prime Minister. Tal, before the break, you had mentioned the refugee status question. I'll let you finish your thought on that before I move on to my next question for you.
Exactly. So I was saying that UNRWA, its very existence, perpetuates the status of Palestinian victimhood and refugees. Why? Because they consider themselves to be refugees and they inherit the status for 5, 6 generations now, since the war of 1948, when Israel was established, when the Arabs and Palestinians started this war to finish off the newly established Jewish state. And they wish to perpetuate the status until the state of Israel will cease to exist. And what do I mean by that? Even though they are Palestinians, let's say, who were born in Ramallah or in the Gaza Strip under Palestinian rule, or even in Jordan or in London, they still consider themselves to be refugees. And that means that as long as UNRWA perpetuate the status, they will be refugees until there's no longer Israel. And in other words, it puts a question mark on the existence of the state of Israel, if you get my point. Palestinians
Yeah.
believe that the state of Israel is some temporary entity that maybe one day won't be there. And it will be Palestine from the river to the sea, as they chant, as they write, as they act on it.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on the employees in question from UNRWA. The UN has said that the employees whom are alleged now to have been involved in the terrorist attack that they were fired. But the question is, will they be prosecuted, and if so, where?
Exactly. It's a good point, the one that you're bringing up. Even if they're being persecuted, what does it mean? There will be a trial. The trial will take place in Gaza. Hamas will decide the ruling. What court? What kind of persecution is that? Well, these are all good questions. This is why we say that it's not just about these 12 members of UNRWA. It's more than that. It's about the 1,200, rather, out of 120,000 employees, 12,000 employees that are 10% of this entire agency that have links with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That's 10%. And that is outrageous. This is why we say that in the day after Hamas, in the rebuilding of Gaza, if we want to see better hope for the future between us and the neighbors, UNRWA cannot be involved. It's part of the problem. It's hard to imagine it being part of the solution. We say that there have to be agencies that are really dedicated to solving problems, not perpetuating problems, that have to be involved there.
And on that note, the U.S. government has said that it could restore funding to UNRWA after an investigation. What would it take for UNRWA to be a trusted distributor of aid for Palestinian civilians?
Listen, it is flawed from bottom up. Its very existence is illegitimate the way we see it. Of course, there has to be a distribution mechanism for aid to the Palestinian people. Of course, we want to see the humanitarian aid reaching the right people. And this is why Israel, by the way, is facilitating the entrance of aid. And we place no restrictions on water, medical supplies, food coming into the Gaza Strip from the border crossings. We just examine these trucks, but UNRWA clearly hasn't been doing its job. It has been overlooking the fact that these trucks, many of them are stolen by Hamas, actually giving them coverage. And by the way, David, just 24 hours ago, I saw several videos of Palestinians speaking to IDF soldiers, cursing UNRWA because they know that they are in bed with the terrorists. And also telling these IDF troops, and I can send you the link, don't leave
Mhm.
Gaza before you eliminate Hamas.
Yeah, and that certainly highlights maybe a gap in understanding for media outlets and others outside of the region. Is the Israeli government confident in the other aid organizations? We have about 30 seconds left here, whom can distribute aid.
I can tell you that the backlog in the distribution is not on our end because we have excess capacity to check these trucks that they don't contain any kind of ammunitions before they go into Gaza. The distribution, of
Mhm.
course, we understand it's challenging. It's a war zone, but we didn't want this war and we didn't start this war. Hamas are the ones to blame. And UNRWA is, as you can see, involved with them. So we hope that there are better ways to distribute this aid.
Tal, thank you very much for joining us again.
Of course.